What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. This is another really cool lecture that I've come across from none other than David Icke. And he's talking about a number of things relating to the Archons, but also this one is pretty interesting because he also touches upon, in a way, this is really Gnostic heavy. So if you guys are not familiar with Gnosticism, this is kind of a sect of Christianity, but vastly different than all the other sects of Christianity. Really getting away from the idea of we are born into original sin. Jesus died on died on the cross for our sins to free us, to liberate us, to allow us to be saved. In fact, the way that it's described is, in fact, that the material world, at least the world that we currently reside in, is inherently a trap, and that in and of itself is a negative place. And Jesus was simply one of not God incarnated, the way it's described, as like he's the soul, the key to salvation. But what Jesus was, according to the Gnostic text, was simply a highly elevated figure, spiritually, mentally, that tried to show people the way to break free of the material world and this repetitive cycle of reincarnation and being trapped in this flawed material world. And he said that the key to escape is within this. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And so that's the underpinnings of this lecture. Is he's talking a lot about the Gnostic philosophies and the Gnostic theories. But what I find really interesting in particular is this is the first time where I've heard the story of the Pleroma and of Maria and the what's it called, the Valdebas, oh my god, I'm blanking on the name now, but the Demiurge, there we go, the Demiurge creating this material world, thinking that he's God. But like, it just seemed very, I didn't really understand if the entire material world, or all material worlds, all universes, all multiverses were one just giant mess, or is this some side creation that there is a material world that is in balance, and he's created the Demiurge just created something in some offshoot. And this kind of answers it, and it's the latter. It sounds like there are physical worlds or physical universes, according to what David Icke says here, that are in harmony and in balance, and that are in alignment with kind of our intrinsic moral compasses. But what the reality that apparently we live in is a bad copy. Okay, we're going to get into all that in this video, but a lot of really cool stuff to break down and explain. So we're going to first get into this first clip. Very, very cool. It's talking about the Archons. The Archons would be, under the Gnostic paradigm, the entities that are managing this system and managing this bad copy, this negative universe, and making sure we stay in it, or as many of us stay in it as possible, to keep it going. Check this out.
Parasites. They possess humanity and manipulate the way they perceive.
Sorry, let me try that again. It's accidentally skipped the clip. Here we go. Boom.
Parasites. They possess humanity and manipulate the way they perceive everything. And they say the word you could use more than any about the Archons was deception. They are deceivers. And what they create is an inversion of the natural order, which will become so crystal clear as we go along. Now, as I've kind of studied this and put it together, it seems to me that what we're looking at is what I would call a self-aware distortion, and it's self-aware inversion.
Okay, so I want to talk about two things here. The fact that he calls the Archons, who are essentially managing the entire system, as being deceptive. And then I also want to talk about this word he says, inversion, the inversion of natural order. So the first thing that's interesting to observe is when he talks about the idea that the Archons are deceptive by nature. You've probably heard that quote, "As it is above, so it is below." And you may not really pause to think about this, but I've thought about it a lot. Maybe you have. It's like, if you look at our world, kind of, you grow up in it, you're used to it. Everything that we experience feels very natural and normal at a certain point in our lives, and we just kind of accept it. Yeah, the world is cutthroat. Yeah, marketing firms kind of lie to people all the time, and that's just you just got to sell products. If you really think about it, the entire way that products, that services are marketed in this country, or in this planet, not the country, in the planet, it's all inherently, it's like justified lying. It's actually insane if you really think about it. Think about how many products or places claim to be the best product or the best place, or they'll lie without any problem as long as it passes an FDA inspection, or it's allowed by certain standards of ethics that are legally passed. It's like nobody stops to think, yeah, but should I be saying that this is a healthy snack if truly we know it's not? Should Coca-Cola and these other companies be peddling all of this sugary nonsense to kids and trying to position it as reasonably healthy or in moderate, all the stuff that is just clear lies? Should they be doing that? Absolutely not. But we have just become so common. It's just become so accustomed to it that it seems normal. But when we talk about the deception that is going on to us, I feel like it makes sense that we then, if we're part of this system, that we then feel so okay with following these standards of operation on this planet to just be this way, and to even just take advantage of people all the time. People get taken advantage of all the time. I mean, you just look at the small examples of going to new places and jumping in a taxi and getting taken on the wrong route, or just little things like this that everybody tries to get one over on the other person. Even two people get into a car accident, the person who clearly knows they're at fault will fight tooth and nail and try to get out from underneath the responsibility. I mean, like, this is just has become the norm in our culture and in our society at large. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to this, but I do think this is an indication, maybe not of, oh, like we're so terrible, but maybe this is a dim reflection of the forces that are really in charge. And maybe that's where all of it's coming from, a certain place. And we're falling in line. We're falling for the system when we're thinking that is normal, and then we mimic this type of behavior. Like, that kind of makes sense. Now, talking about the inversion of natural order again, I think this goes back to this idea of how we accept all of these negative things as commonplace. With that's not normal, and I think we all know that intrinsically. Like, it feels off. We all say, but like, that's life. That's how it is. Yeah, I think we've been effectively brainwashed by being in this life, by being in this dimension and seeing all that goes on, and just brush it off. But it's not normal. Another great example of the inversion of the natural order is, why is the political system the way it is? People complain about it all the time. They talk about how politicians, like, they all lie and haha, but that's a politician for you. What are you going to do? And we just brush it off yet. And we continuously elect people or put people in positions of power that have, I'm not saying everybody, but by and large, that are usually doing it for some ulterior motive, for power, for money, and usually don't have a great amount of empathy for the greater public at large, and are usually essentially selfishly driven, and perhaps are indeed psychopaths, meaning cut off from the rest of society. That's the way I think of a psychopath is somebody that lacks empathy, and therefore they have that part of them that the rest of us have, that we feel a connection to other people, or we can kind of feel their emotions, feel their pain, have sympathy, empathy, all these things, which is, I think, just natural, because empathy is real. Other people are feeling things. We are all connected at some level. So I think being a psychopath is some artificial disconnection of the truth of reality, that we all are connected and we all are one. But so anyways, these folks that maybe have these artificial disconnections from reality, the fact that we are all one, and when somebody else suffers, like, we should feel that, because at some level they're a part of us. They keep seeming to rise to these positions of power and authority and leadership in our society. And again, we just brush it off as, well, that's normal, or these are the cutthroat people, or these are the people that are most ambitious or the smartest or whatever, which, even if that's the case, it's still not a good basis to have them be at the top and running our society. I don't care how smart somebody is if they're morally bankrupt. And I don't think any of us should accept that either, yet we do. And it's, again, an indication of this inversion of what we know should be right, and probably coming from this top-down level, from the archontic level. Okay, this next clip talks about, again, the archontic mind, the mind that is managing everything, is psychopathic in nature. And as it is above, so it is below. I hope I'm getting that quote approximately right. I don't think it's exactly right, but approximately, hopefully.
And the other thing about the archontic mind is it's what we call psychopathic. They're psychopaths, the definition of which is this: no empathy, no remorse, no empathy, no ability to put themselves in the feelings of those that suffer the consequences of their actions. Once you have no empathy, you have no limit to what you will do because you have no emotional consequence for doing it.
Again, it makes sense if this is the managerial system of everything that's going on, if it's cut off, that folks that share those characteristics or those traits would seeming to somewhat naturally rise to the top. And again, I think it's important to remember what is being a psychopath, what is psychopathy. I think if that's the right word, it's just being cut off from everybody to the point where people feel like objects, which we all know we are. I do think that we are all one on some level. We have our individual natures, we have our unique identities, but one in a way like connected, little droplets of water, but still part of one big ocean. And I think that is reality. And being a psychopath is effectively being cut off from that reality. Why, how, I don't know. Is it through these entities? Is it maybe some level of evolution that the soul hasn't reached to make this realization? I don't exactly know, but I do find it interesting that he describes that these entities, the minds of these entities that run everything, are in their nature is to be psychopaths. Now, this next clip talks about the distortion of our perception that is constantly happening and why, sort of what's keeping us spellbound, if you will, in this planet from the Archons. Check this out.
So this whole archontic system is about programming our perception, programming a distortion of our perception, an inversion of our perception, which is why we live in a madhouse, because it's an inversion of the natural order.
Again, that inversion concept comes back in, but yeah, distorting our perception. Now, this I have more questions about. I'm wondering what this means. Does it mean bring us into this world and continue to condition us throughout our lives to accept it as natural? I'm not, or is it, through some other mechanisms or means? I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, it makes sense that the way to keep us trapped in this reality and thinking that it's normal is by modifying our perception, even though I think we're in touch with it, our true perceptions, our innate perceptions, but trying to manipulate them and modify them so that we sign off on what's going on. We buy into this artificial reality. Okay, here's where he talks about this notion of the bad copy. This is the part that was really interesting to me, because if you have dove into Gnosticism and Gnostic texts, that's the part, at least for me, that I was having trouble getting my head around, the way that it has been described thus far in terms of, I guess you could say, the creation story of this bad copy or of this flawed material universe. It just sheds a little bit more light on it. It lets me get my head around it a little bit better. But curious to know your thoughts. So check this out. This is David Icke explaining this whole bad copy idea.
There was another world described by the ancients, and very much along the lines of the Avatar movie and the Na'vi, the blue people, and how they interacted with the natural world, how they communicated with animals, how they communicated with each other beyond speech. And what the Gnostic texts say is that the Archons made a bad copy, as they describe it, of our original reality. The original reality was that kind of Avatar world. That world is an information construct which we decode into a lovely world. This is an information construct which we decode into the world that we have today. And the idea, this might need a battery, mate. The idea is was to create this illusory reality, anyway, and then tuning humans into that bad copy. Now, when you think about it, we're tuned into an information field of certain frequencies. We decode that into a reality. If we are then moved, our dial is moved, so we're decoding something else, we just decode another completely different reality. And that's what is meant by this bad copy. So this is an image that sums it up. I'm walking outside in the sun. You don't have to be in the sun. You just have to decode the fact you're in the freaking sun. And it's the same with this bad copy. You just decode a reality and you think it's real because it's the only one that you can perceive. So you can decode a reality of the avatar kind, and then you are fed a different information source, tuned into it, ways that I'll come to, and then you decode a different reality, what I call the archontic reality. If you can create a virtual reality simulation, then you can create an alternative to it as well, which is what the bad copy is.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions on everything he just said. Curious to know if anybody has some answers to this in the comments. So the first question is, when he talks about this bad copy, is he saying it's just a bad copy of Earth and maybe the solar system or something like that? Or is it just a planet and is it like some virtual copy of this little subset? And that's what the demiurge built? Or is it an entire universe that's a bad copy? What exactly is he referring to? And then when he's talking about the frequency, and it almost sounds like we're in two places at once, maybe, if I'm understanding that right, that we could be in this other normal realm where we originally came from, but something has happened. Our minds are conditioned in a way that we're picking up a different frequency. So we're still technically in the same place, but we're decoding it in a different way into this negative reality that we find ourselves trapped in. And so I think perhaps what he's saying is the power is within us to just phase into the other positive reality, the Navi type reality, the avatar type reality that he's describing. But I don't know if I'm getting that exactly right. Or the only way to transition is after the time you pass out, or can we do it right now? Like, I'm not exactly sure. That's the part that's a little difficult for me to understand as of yet. But in terms of the other part where just the creation story now being described as, hey, there was an because I don't remember that from the Gnostic information that I've seen thus far, primarily in videos. I thought it sounded like this entire universe was created, but what he's saying is there was a regular spot that where everything was not inverted, and a negative copy of that was created, and that's where we find ourselves. So I did find that pretty interesting because it gives a little bit more clarity and explanation to this Gnostic creation story that I felt was just sounded just a little too mythological for my liking. Okay, now we get to this part. This is crazy. He's talking about ancient texts like a couple thousand years ago that they definitely describe the reptilians, but they really describe the Greys in crazy detail. These are the texts found at Nag Hammadi in 1945 or 1947 or something like that. This is wild. Check this out.
These Gnostic writings have been estimated to have been buried in that sealed jar between about 350 and 400 AD, which corresponds with the destruction of the great library of Alexandria run by Gnostic thinkers. But it's suggested that they were possibly written about 100 AD. In those documents, all that time ago, best part of 2,000 years, they say that the archons can take form, and the main forms they take are reptilian entities and those known today as Greys. The archons describe the Greys as like an unborn baby or fetus with grey skin and dark, unmoving eyes. That was nearly 2,000 years ago, and it's the same description as what we call grey entities today in the modern world. And I've been saying for a long time now that behind the human networks of control is a reptilian form. But I did say a long time ago, I didn't think it ended there. I thought it went into the realms of something else. And this something else is this archontic inversion, I would suggest. Like I said,
wild. That is crazy. And essentially, so these two entities that people have seen or that have been part of UFO lore as long back as we can remember in human history, he's now tying to the archontic force, this force that seems to be managing or controlling humanity at large. That's so wild. Like that's a pretty spot on description. And how they connected them to the archontic force, I'd like to know more. that also may not be the reality. It just may have been people that were observing these forces, observing these entities, and maybe they jumped to that conclusion and they connected them. I'd want to know more about why they're connecting those entities to the quote unquote archonic forces. But anyways, I thought it was very fascinating in general, just from the single standpoint that these entities were being described in that type of detail from these entries 2,000 years ago. Wild stuff, or around 2,000 years ago. Wild stuff. Anyways, came across this video, wanted to share those couple different concepts. Let me know your thoughts on all of this stuff. Still digging for more information, still trying to find more stuff out. I got a lot more information, a lot more things to check out from so many comments in over the last week. Please keep those coming. Please keep the recommendations coming. I'm going to continue to look into more information, investigate more things. I'm almost done with the alien interview. I'm about to do a huge video on that book. I've been carefully documenting all these different excerpts. That book is wild, and there's a lot of overlaps in that book to what has been uncovered via remote viewing. So very, very fascinating stuff. You guys should check that book out if you haven't yet. I only found that book, by the way, because again, recommendations in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.